Well, welcome to my YouTube channel, Josh the Severe Weather, meteorologist here in the Carolinas, and I hope you all are having a great week. We're going to talk about tropics, the future of Tropical Storm Franklin, and other potential systems that could be impacting our weather here in the next couple of weeks, and maybe some changes coming where the U.S. could be looking at some more active weather. We did have our first landfalling tropical storm of the season yesterday. That was Tropical Storm Harold, which brought some needed rain to parts of South Texas, a little bit of flooding and severe weather as well. Unfortunately, Harold got its act together right before landfall and not a few days before, so that system was not as strong as it would have otherwise been. But we are certainly not done in the tropics yet. The peak of the season is September 10th. We're still a few weeks away from that. And I do expect we're going to have some more storms, and the Gulf of Mexico looks to be a spot that we have to keep an eye on here in the coming weeks. So I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to talk about Franklin, which is right now struggling with some wind shear and getting ready to move into the Dominican Republic. But models showing a pretty good chance that Franklin will strengthen and become our next hurricane as we get into the end of the week and weekend time frame north of Hispaniola. So we're going to keep an eye on that. The eastern seaboard needs to watch. Although right now projections are that it's going to curve away from the coast, but it may be close enough to affect beach conditions and water conditions on the beaches here in the coming week. There's also going to be another area that we are going to keep an eye on that models are not yet really latched on to, but have hinted at. And I'm going to talk about why I believe this is an area to watch and why the models are struggling. And that is going to be something that is going to increase our amount of rainfall and moisture in the southeast, in particular in Florida and the southeast coast here next week, and could be still around as we head into Labor Day weekend. So I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. On our satellite imagery, you can see that we do have the tropical depression now, Harold, and that is moving into southwest Texas very quickly and sending moisture up into the southwest. It really looked like the southwest was not going to have a lot of a monsoon season, but in the last couple of weeks, we've certainly seen that change here as our region of high pressure that was in the southwest several weeks ago has now shifted into the central part of the country, and that is where we're seeing some extreme amounts of heat. So definitely an area of moisture that we have to keep an eye on that could produce some heavy rainfall here across southwestern Texas. So let me get that off the screen. The rest of the tropics right now are not impactful to the United States. We see nothing but dry air here in the Pacific with a region of high pressure off the California coast. We see our large region of high pressure over the midsection of the country, and temperatures are soaring because of it and continue to stay hot. And then we see a trough here over the western United States sending moisture up and over this ridge into the northeast in the form of clouds, and some cooler air coming down here from Canada with a boundary that slips south through the Carolinas. That front, unfortunately, like you see on the screen here, is going to vanish and retreat back to the northeast. So hot air returns to a certain degree, especially when you get up to about Interstate 80, Interstate 90, but then New England avoids that heat. So definitely some good news there. Now, coming up on our tropical outlook here, we have cleared the map of mostly all storms except Franklin for the time being. If you remember, a few days ago, we had 5 areas of concern. Well, Harold was one of them, and that is just a remnant low moving through the Big Bend of Texas into southwest Texas. We do have Tropical Storm Franklin, and then this area here, hang on one second. Don't know why my browser is doing that, but this area here is what was Tropical Storm Emily, and it looks like it's going to try to make a comeback here in the next couple of days. Fortunately, no threat to land here. That is going to be moving through the north central Atlantic, which during an El Nino season typically sees busier activity than on an average season. The reason why is that the water temperatures are warmer here and wind shear is lower in this part of the Atlantic. This area I'm going to keep an eye on. Right now, it is not in a spot to develop. It is actually being hampered by Emily. I'm going to show you that in a minute, but may become a system here gradually, maybe just a depression. And you see it is kind of aimed towards Bermuda, although I think it is going to be following Emily at some point here. And that could be our next developing system. But for the time being, Franklin is really the only thing on the map. Now in the Pacific, we are going to see potentially another storm system. This is exactly where Hillary formed. I'm not saying we're going to have another Hillary for California, but obviously in Mexico and the Gulf of California and the Baja, we do need to keep an eye on this potential system in the coming days. This is a look at the European ensembles. These are low pressure solutions, and I will set this gradually into motion here And this is tomorrow, and you can see this is Franklin here. This is the remains of Gert, which is not probably going to make any kind of comeback. This is the remains of Emily, which could make a comeback. This is our next area of disturbed weather, Invest 92L. The L is for the Atlantic. 92 is just the number sequence it gets. And then you see here in the Pacific side of Central America, a couple of potential low pressure areas that will be forming. One heading west up the Mexican coast. The other looks like it's going to try to find its way across Central America and head into the northwestern Caribbean. But that is the area that has the greatest amount of uncertainty with it right now. So nothing set in stone, just an area that we definitely need to watch, because the European, on several of its ensemble solutions, has shown a weaker system that will be moving up towards the Gulf of Mexico next week. So anyway, as we move things forward, this is the remains of Emily, which may again make a comeback for a couple of days. This is 92L, which doesn't look like it's going to develop anytime soon, but may try to develop once Emily moves out of the way. This is Franklin, and I'm going to talk more about that. Obviously, that is our best chance at being a hurricane in the next week. And you can see here's Bermuda right here. Let me get that annotation back on. This is Bermuda, and you can see the models are taking it kind of near or just to the west of Bermuda Triangle here in the coming days. And then here's our next area to watch, and quite a bit of spread in the models, as you might expect for a system that has not developed. Actually, let me do the spotlight here. This is Bermuda, this is Franklin, and this is potentially our next system here. This is also potentially our next system, so kind of two areas that I'm going to keep an eye on for you here. So anyway, let me move things along. And this is going to be next Sunday night and Monday. So you see Franklin on the map over here. You see several potential solutions here in the Northwest Caribbean, near the Yucatan, or even near Cuba. Again, quite a bit of spread, as you might expect, for a system that has not yet developed, but is forming out of the gyre here. And this is what's probably going to be falling apart here. So it is very possible that this system here, 92L, tries to become our eye storm, but I'm not necessarily sold on that happening. So you see just a lot of kind of lower end solutions here. These pressures are over 1,000 millibars. I'm not really sure that's going to happen. There may just be a little bit too much wind shear coming across this system here. So the area that we really do need to keep an eye on, and again, it's a ways off, but here's the problem. It's closer to land than the other systems, is this area over here. And I'm going to zoom in and show you guys that here in a little while. So as we move this along here into next week, we see several solutions that are either stuck in the Bay of Campeche or heading up towards Florida. And we've seen storm after storm this time of the year in the Gulf of Mexico do one of two things. Either it fights wind shear the entire time, just sends moisture up, or it very quickly develops within a couple days of landfall. And all of those are certainly on the table at this point. Do I know exactly what's going to happen? Of course not. This is still a week out, but it is something I do think you need to keep an eye on, especially if you're in Florida, but even in the rest of the Gulf of Mexico for that matter. Either way, as we head towards next Thursday and right before Labor Day, we do have several solutions that show that there will be moisture heading up in this direction. Where it goes is anybody's guess at this point. So that is what I'm going to be watching for you guys here. So here's Harold. Again, just a rainmaker at this point, moving past the Big Bend into West Texas and southeastern New Mexico. And that storm didn't really look great until it came upon landfall. We had wind gusts to 63 miles per hour and about 5 inches of rain in the Corpus Christi area. If it had another 12 hours over water, it may have tried to even sneak up to hurricane status. You know, and if you were watching my videos here over the weekend, this should not have been any kind of surprise. I think, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but I think it was pretty well forecast. I think everything worked out the way that we expected. It stuck to the plan. Now, here's the European ensembles. This is weatherbell.com. And as I step this forward for you, you can see a very, very clear system here, Franklin. This is the remains of Emily, which the European ensemble says there's about a 70 to 80% chance this will become a tropical storm again at the end of this week. This is between Thursday night and Friday night. Now, taking that forward, that system's going to move well up into the northern Atlantic and weaken. Harold is still going to be around here. This is Bermuda. Let me pull I'm still learning Zoom, and yesterday in my video, I had to edit out a frustration I had. We're all human. We all get frustrated, but this is Bermuda here. And this is Franklin, and you can see it's going to come by very close to Bermuda, possibly even some way midway between the Outer Banks over here and Bermuda. And then we have to watch and see what happens, but more than likely turning away from the East Coast due to the fact that we do have a trough swinging into New England, and that is going to pick it up and swing it eastward. So anyway, that's what I'm going to be watching for you guys here. And as we move this along, we see that recurve, but then we see in the northeastern Gulf a potential system here Wednesday into Thursday. This doesn't say it's going to be a hurricane, doesn't say it's going to be a depression, tropical storm. It just says there's going to be something to watch. And I talked about that in yesterday's video that a lot of you folks did see. And in that video, there was at no point me saying there would definitely be a hurricane hit. It just says that Florida could be the next spot that gets a storm. And I still believe that's going to be the case today. Here, by the way, you can see the Atlantic system is not going to likely develop into a tropical storm according to the European. It's going to fade into the sunset here, but there is something behind it coming off of Africa next week that does have a chance of forming. But again, it's not going to be a really big deal. So let me take that back for you guys. And you can see a potential tropical storm according to some of the ensembles. And of course, there's some that don't have it. That's why our chances are so low. But then that's going to be recurving and moving up the southeast coast here and moving out. So as I go back to that time step here, you'll see the depression chances are certainly higher. And there may be something in the Bay of Campeche that splits off, and there may be something that turns northeast towards Florida. I think that's certainly possible. When I show you the upper pattern, you'll see what I'm talking about. But of course, as we get into the future, things become less and less and less certain. That's why you see chances going down. It doesn't mean there won't be anything. It just means probabilistically, it's a less than 50% chance. So that's anyway what I wanted to show you guys. Anyway, here is a look at what's going on in the Caribbean. And I'm going to go ahead and bring my spotlight back here. This is Franklin right here. The center is actually getting ready to move in and head this direction across Hispaniola. And all of the action is on the east side of the storm. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Here we've got a gyre that's kind of centered right over Central America right here. And there's kind of two pieces. One here that looks like it's going to split off and ride along the Mexican coast. There's another area that hasn't really shown enough persistent thunderstorm activity, and it probably won't because it's over land. But the models do eventually, because we've got this upper level feature here, this trough here, eventually show that trough splitting, and that would allow, it's going to kind of move things northward into areas of lower pressure, but that would allow something to come up in here. And I don't know if it's going to be this way or this way or this way at this point. It's still several days away from any potential development. But either way, because that trough splits, we do see an avenue here to see something coming up northward, maybe towards Cuba, maybe towards the Yucatan. And that seems to be a spot that we really do need to keep an eye on in later August, in September, even in early October, as many, many storms have formed, whether or not it's an El Nino or a La Nina. We are in El Nino, which typically favors more storms in the Pacific than the Atlantic. But the Pacific has gotten to H and the Atlantic has gotten to H. So right now we're tied here for the time being. So anyway, that's where we stand for the time being. Here's a look at Harold, and you can see the storm making a comeback. There was kind of a reformation of centers yesterday. I did post that to my YouTube community, but I'll show you what I'm talking about here. We had a kind of a center over here, a low-level center, and then one that reformed over here, and that's where the thunderstorms have kind of taken shape from this eastern center. However, they're just kind of two broad centers that are kind of circulating around each other, and all the action's on the east side. And the reason why is we've got southwesterly wind shear here over the Western Caribbean, and that's kind of blowing all the thunderstorms away from the center of the storm to the eastern side of the storm. And unfortunately, that is not a good thing for the Dominican Republic. They are getting significant amounts of rain here, even in Santo Domingo here on the southeastern part, and probably up to a foot in some of these mountains that reside in here. That's going to be torrential flooding. Even Haiti has some mountains in here, and you can see there's a blow up of storms on the western side of our center that is going to crush this portion of Haiti. So this is not going to be as much of a wind maker as it is a rain maker due to the fact that it's still disorganized. But the wind shear is set to relax. So I think it is going to hold its own as it comes over the mountains. It may weaken some, but once it makes it away from the mountains here of Hispaniola, it's got a chance at redeveloping. And I'm going to show you how that looks here in the next couple of frames here. The forecast has landfall later this morning, tropical storm warning for a good chunk of Hispaniola, and now a tropical storm warning for the Turks and Caicos. Now you will see that that trough I showed you is going to push it and turn it to the right, It's actually going to find itself in a favorable place to strengthen north of Puerto Rico this weekend. And then high pressure is going to build back in from the east and push it to the west of Bermuda. Now, there's still a chance Bermuda could have direct or indirect impacts from this system early next week. There's also a chance this system could go on the western side of this and bring more of a high surf into the mid-Atlantic states here next week. So we're going to have to watch that. But right now, the models do show, despite that reformation of the center, that there's pretty good spread here, but not large spread, and that it's going to go west of Bermuda over here and east of the Outer Banks. Here are the ensembles. Again, when you get to ensembles, this is the GFS ensemble, a little bit more spread. A few solutions do bring a hurricane up into Nova Scotia or just off the coast, but the average is about 300 or 400 miles off the coast. The European is actually less severe with that turn and more of a recurve here. The European ensembles showing it well to the south and east of Nova Scotia, but possibly clipping Cape Race, Newfoundland, and the Avalon Peninsula. So I'm going to show you a tropical model. This is the HAFS, and this system and this run of the model shows that while Franklin is struggling at this point, a very weak system. This is tonight. Here's tomorrow. By the time it gets north and east of the Turks and Caicos over here, it is strengthening, and pressures are dropping down below 1,000 millibars. So this is about 24 hours from this video time frame. And then you will see that the system is going to be in a spot where the wind shear relaxes, and it likely is going to strengthen on Friday, Thursday night and Friday. And by Friday afternoon or Friday night, this run shows it becoming a hurricane. As we get beyond that into the weekend, it shows it becoming a major hurricane, our first one of the season. Is this, out of the realm of possibility? Is this model just going to town with it? Certainly that's possible, but GFS, some of the other global models have shown this is going to strengthen. So it's very possible we do have a Category 3 storm. This particular model goes well beyond that and has a big storm, 925 millibars. And in my opinion, that's probably overdone. These tropical models sometimes latch on to an idea and go nuts with them. 918 millibars would be pushing Category 5 strength. This is Bermuda over here, by the way. So let me annotate that and show you. This is Bermuda, and obviously the circulation center is well west of it, but 918 millibars is an intense storm. I don't think we've ever seen a storm quite that strong, that close to Bermuda. We've seen Category 3s and 4s, but not Category 5s. So in my opinion, this is definitely overdone, but we could have maybe a Category 2, 3, or even a low-end Category 4 hurricane at this point. That is my general thinking at this time. And then you can see the system is going to go continuing north and west. Here's a look at the wind field with it. Again, not very impressive for the next couple of days, but then getting its act together this time tomorrow and strengthening. And tomorrow night, we likely have a hurricane with wind speeds of about 84 miles per hour by Friday morning. But it doesn't stop there. You can see over the Western Atlantic, 94 miles per hour on Saturday, and then a mature hurricane with 130 miles per hour. So it does show that there will be rapid intensification at some point in here over the weekend. Now, that's just one model run, so I can show this to you all day, and it ends up being wrong. 140 miles per hour. Maybe, but I think that's probably being over forecast. And you can see that's at HFAS. Every other model says it will be a hurricane. Every model has it, by the way, as a hurricane here, other than the UK Met. But the majority of those models show it as a Category 1. That's this yellow color here. And some show Category 2 or 3. Only the HFAS model, which is that improved tropical model, shows it strengthening into a Category 5. Probably a 2 or 3 is my forecast at this point. That's where I'll go at this time. All right, so in the Central Atlantic, you will see that we do have the remains of what was briefly Tropical Storm Gert. Too much wind shear to really allow those thunderstorms to continue, but we'll keep an eye on it. Some of the models did try to show that strengthening some. This is the remains of Emily and kind of missing a low-level center, but developing quite a bit of thunderstorm activity. And then this is 92L behind it. And you can see the outflow from the remains of Emily is actually impeding the progress and the intensification of 92L. So it's just a crowded map in the Central Atlantic, 3 competing systems at this point. And here's Franklin. And Franklin is producing wind shear over Gert. That's why Gert was around and then weakened very quickly. So at this point, no threat to any kind of land from any of these systems. But this is the remains of Emily. You can see it recurves, and then that will eventually be potentially an issue for Ireland and the UK next week. There is certainly, though, evidence that this will become a tropical storm again here the next couple of days, but again, no threat to land. It'll become extratropical. And then as we look at the eastern Atlantic, let me get my pen back up here. I'm still learning Zoom. And this is 92L at this point, and it just doesn't have enough sustained convection to become any kind of a tropical system. After Emily over here moves away, there will be a window for it to become a tropical depression, I think, but probably nothing worse than that. And then you can see here is another disturbance coming off of Africa. There's actually a bit of a low-level center in here. And then the one behind it's the one actually that some of these models show it developing. So we'll watch Africa, but right now I'm not really concerned about any development. Here's the remains of Emily. You can see wind shear, and there's significant thunderstorm activity, but the low-level center is over here. So this is not likely going to be quickly wrapping up into anything. This is 92L in the eastern Atlantic. And again, way too much disorganization at this time. And here's where 92L is going to track. If it does develop, it's going to continue to move northwestward, and some models show that recurving or starting to take that bend well east of Bermuda. Intensity forecasts, again, keeping it below tropical storm strength. Only a few models show it as a tropical storm. That wouldn't be until this upcoming weekend. And then here's a look at our global models, the European model, going back to yesterday. And you can see the Europeans got this area that we're watching here over Central America. It's got Franklin over here. And as we move things along into the weekend, very slow development here over the Western Caribbean or the Bay of Campeche. It, of course, is developing Franklin into a hurricane over the weekend. This is Saturday night, early Sunday morning, Zulu time. And then next week, definitely a Category 2 hurricane on the European, maybe Category 3. Here's Bermuda, but going west of Bermuda. And then we're still keeping an eye on all this moisture down here around the Yucatan. The European says there will be lots of rain coming into Florida, but it is not developing anything into a named system. That could be wrong, but that's what the European is showing. The Canadian model, on the other hand, is the one that continues to be most bullish. It's got one system here moving close to the Riviera of Mexico over the weekend, another system slowly forming. And this is not a tropical storm yet. It's a depression at the very best. And this would be Friday night. And then here's Franklin, which, by the way, the Canadian is weaker with than the European for a couple of days. But it takes this system, it pulls it away from the Yucatan and brings it up over Cuba and into the southeastern Gulf as potentially a tropical storm. And this run of the Canadian says it could even become a hurricane. None of the other models are showing that. This is just one model, so don't get locked in on it yet. It's just showing that there will be potentially something heading towards Florida next week, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. But this is one run of the Canadian. It looks scarier than what I think it could end up being. But man, I've been around in this business for over 20 years, and it doesn't take much. All you need is a little bit of reduction in wind shear. The waters are super warm, and something that the models aren't picking up on could certainly form. And I think there's that chance next week. So if you're in Florida, now's a good time just talk about initial preparations if a storm were to impact you. I mean, if you're in Florida and it's late August and September and even early October, I really think that that's a necessity. But I don't want to cause unnecessary panic and say this model run's going to be right. You'll watch it change here run after run. So just keep an eye on it at this point. Franklin, not a threat to land. It's going to be recurving. And then you see the Canadian tries to develop not 92L, but the wave after it. But that's already turning away to the north. It also does show that pressure's lower again in the Western Gulf. So Texas and Louisiana might want to keep an eye on this. But again, that's 10 days away and a lot can still change. Here are the European ensembles. So I'll show you that there's still way too much spread here. Now that Canadian was the one that was showing development, but if you look at the ensembles on the European, there's all kinds of solutions out there, from a weak system to maybe a developing system in the Bay of Campeche to a tropical storm or possibly even a hurricane somewhere in the southeastern Gulf. This would be next Tuesday evening, the 29th, and then the 30th. But you do see about 10 ensemble solutions going across Florida into Georgia and the southeast. The Canadians showing it as well. So it is something we definitely need to keep a close eye on at this point. If it doesn't develop, I'm okay with that. I would be wrong. I would eat my words. And that's fine because I really don't wish any kind of destruction on anybody. But at the very least, I do think we're going to be talking about significant rains here and what could end up being a washout for parts of the Labor Day weekend in the southeast. All right, the GFS model, I'll show it to you, but it is not picking up an idea and running with it. It just shows moisture over the Gulf of Mexico. By the way, it also is showing Hurricane Franklin passing close to but west of Bermuda, which is over here, and then pulling away and not threatening Canada. After that, it doesn't show anything too major except for potentially a hurricane here well over the central and eastern Atlantic before the 8th of September. Here's the European control. It shows all that moisture coming up into the southeast. This does not guarantee a hurricane, but it shows there's something tropical and it's feeding up into Florida. These are departures from average, anywhere from 3 to 6 inches, more than what you would expect in a 5-day stretch here over the southeast. And that time frame looks to be starting on the 30th, next Wednesday, a week from today, and then continuing into next Thursday. So it could be pretty wet here with a stalled front and tropical moisture expanding into the southeast. That will be good as we can cut into our deficit of dryness and our heat that we're dealing with, but it could also make things very wet. All right, looking back out in the Atlantic, not a lot more to talk about at this point. The European shows maybe some development with a wave that is going to come off of Africa on Sunday and Monday. So again, that's way out in the future. The Canadian says that system is going to develop as well. It also develops the system ahead of it, and that could be overdone. It's got a little farther south, which of course would be somewhat concerning, but you can see in the last few frames, it is starting to turn that system off to the north and east. And obviously we still have to watch things in the central Atlantic, but that's a good sign if you're in the US. And the GFS model is the one that develops it a lot faster and recurves it faster. The GFS loves to develop these things quicker than they actually do develop. But there's a decent chance we could have our J storm, Jose, and that's of course assuming we have our I storm here in the eastern Atlantic or eastern Gulf. So anyway, the reason why I do think there will be something to keep an eye on in the Gulf is pretty simple, actually. If you look at the upper level pattern, you've got our huge heat dome, our anomalously strong, unusually strong high pressure region here in the plains. That's why we're looking at triple digits in Minnesota and Illinois today into tomorrow. Now that high pressure area is going to weaken some, and we've got a strengthening trough, which is going to bring cooler air into this area next week. What happens is that trough splits into the northeastern Gulf, and that allows an avenue for moisture to come up, and then high pressure builds in behind it. This is a classic case of a trough split where we do need to watch the southeastern US for potential tropical trouble. And then as this high pressure area builds in Labor Day weekend, you'll see another piece of energy comes down here and keeps things pretty unsettled across parts of the Tennessee Valley into the Appalachians here the following week. And if that splits again, which this model shows, and high pressure rebuilds up into the Great Lakes, then we certainly are going to be more active in the Gulf and off the southeast coast after about the 10th of September. So you see this 10th to 15th time frame. This is the ridge over eastern Canada. This is what causes potential issues in the Gulf and on the southeast coast. But it's still way off in the future, 4 weeks on, and we can't really rely on just a couple of ensembles at this point. We just watch the overall pattern. Thank you so much for watching today. I really do appreciate it. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I want to give all the glory to God as I do every day as a Christian man. He gives me the strength to do what I do. We all are dealing with negativity in our lives. Social media brings a lot of that out. I've seen it on my channel. Unfortunately, it's frustrated me a little bit, but I also know that that is just the enemy coming to steal my joy. John 10:10, King James Version, the thief cometh not, but for to steal and for to kill and to destroy. I am come that they may have life and that they might have it more abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. The I in this case is Jesus Christ, our Savior. He is here to deliver us from all of the negativity out there and to give us life, not just life, but abundant life, and to give life for the sheep. As followers of Christ, we can accept him and we can be given that second chance. We can be given the joy that many of us don't really have because we continue to allow the negativity to get to us. That is what Satan wants. He wants us all to be negative. He wants to pull us away from God. He wants to pull us away from Jesus Christ. Jesus, on the other hand, has already given himself up so that we can live abundant lives and that we can live eternally. That is what I have chosen, and I pray that's what you choose as well. Hope you all have a wonderful day today. Please be safe, and we'll chat again in the morning. God bless you.